Hello everyone, welcome to today's Cathedra webinar live on October 16th, 2025. If it's your first time attending one of our Cathedra webinars, Cathedra means learning in Creek, and today you'll be learning about organizational diagnostics, enhancing housing services in Native American communities from Linnell Smith, owner of Black Sheep Insight Consulting and Coaching LLC. My name is Jasmine Raming. I am the marketing coordinator here at the Native Learning Center, and we're also happy that you could join us today. Please follow along as I read the disclaimer out loud. The webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The materials discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. Also displayed here is our copyright infringement law. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar presentation materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Before we get started, I want to familiarize you with the learning platform and where things can be found. I have put the link to the PDF files of today's slides in the chat. You can also access a copy of the slides as well as access today's webinar recording in the future by going to the course section here on our platform. Any resource items for download are also available within the online course when you go through the courses page. Each time you're ready to join one of our webinars moving forward, you'll just need to log into the website and click the large green banner at the top of the screen, just like in this picture. And when you first join a webinar, it will prompt you to complete an audio test before joining. Please select the only option, listen only, so we can avoid audio feedback during the webinar, or we just kindly ask you to mute yourself until we do have a question time. If you are needing to change the speaker or the sound that's playing from it, you can select the phone icon down at the bottom of your screen, and this will bring you up a list of your speaker and mic devices so you can choose your preferred audio output. We do encourage you to participate during today's webinar, and we will primarily rely on the public chat in the left-hand gray menu. You can open the public chat and the shared notes. If you click on the public chat, you will see a chat open between all webinar attendees and the MLC facilitator and your webinar instructor. Simply click in the box that says send message to public chat and type the message you want to send, and hit enter or click the blue paper airplane icon to send your message in. Please send your comments and any questions you have into the chat. Feel free to use the raise your hand feature in the bottom right corner if you think we have missed something along the way. Any tech support issues can be submitted here as well, and I will try to do my best to help navigate through them. If you click on the shared notes section, you'll find some helpful links like today's webinar feedback survey, a link to join our weekly email newsletter so you can know when our webinars and various trainings are happening, a link to our Cathedra webinars archive on our YouTube channel, a link to connect with us on LinkedIn, and a link to bookmark for easy login to Cathedra Constant Learning in the future. Let's all get the chat box going now by letting us know your name, where you're joining us from, your tribal affiliation, if you have one. You may be a tribal employee, and your work or role in Indian country that may have led you to today's webinar. One quick final note while you're introducing yourselves in the chat is to try to avoid clicking the red menu panel all the way on the left of your screen. If you click on this, the red menu panel will take you out of the live webinar. If you do accidentally click this, don't worry, you can simply rejoin again by clicking the green banner at the top. With that, this is with great pleasure, I'm happy to introduce today's webinar instructor, Linnell Smith. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate the intro and all the logistics and such. Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. I am in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is just outside of Albuquerque. So I am on Mountain Time. It officially became afternoon here. It's so exciting to share space with you all and share some information and knowledge around really what organizational diagnostics is and what it means and how you can utilize it in your organization. I really want this to be applicable to things that you can apply like after you go through the webinar, and then also thinking a little more long-term, like, hey, we do need to have maybe some organizational shifts, and how do we incorporate that and make that happen? So we're going to do have a lot of conversation around that. I also want to encourage you all to ask questions. Jasmine is going to help me monitor the chat, so if I happen to miss something, she can definitely bring it to my attention. I want this to be somewhat informal. I know webinars, you just see a talking head. I don't get to see your beautiful faces, but we definitely will be utilizing the chat. I'll ask some questions and get some feedback from you all. So hopefully we're able to turn some time and attention to this, and that it's helpful and informative for you all. So like Jasmine said, my name is Linnell Smith, and I am the owner of Black Sheep Insight Consulting and Coaching. It is my newest consulting company that I have, and it's really been so meaningful to be able to launch this a little over a year ago. And I get to focus on a lot of things that I'm feeling very passionate about, right? And I've worked in tribal communities my entire career. So it's definitely something that I feel strongly and passionately about, but also having the opportunity to really work in grassroots organizations within tribal communities. And then also as a technical assistance provider, you get to see and feel the different nuances within different tribes, and also within different types of departments and different functionalities of those departments. So hopefully I'm able to bring like a lot of that learned experience and practical experience working in tribal communities, but also give you a lens of a different insight, a way of looking at assessing organizations and making shifts and changes that can be beneficial to create efficiencies and ultimately really create a good environment for the communities that we're serving. This one is geared towards housing providers, but I feel like organizational diagnostics can definitely be applied to any kind of service provider within the communities that we're working in. So it may be a little more housing focused, but definitely take away the information and tools that will kind of support any shifts or changes or alignment that needs to happen within your organization. A little bit about my background. I am Danae, born and raised, love the badge of being a res girl. Lived in my community pretty much my entire life. Like I said, I live off reservation now, but home is about 3 hours away. And so I get to still immerse myself there. I had this company for a little over a year, but I've worked in community for a long time. Just prior to the launch of this new business, I worked for a Native CDFI that was a national organization that worked in tribal nations called EWONAP Corporation. So you may or may not have heard of them, but they provide a lot of amazing trainings, and they're quite rooted in Native CDFIs and also in like looking at financial education or financial capabilities work as a foundation for a lot of the work that we're doing. So if you're curious, look up EWONAP Corporation. They do have a training calendar. I used to do a lot of their trainings. I worked on the capacity building side, so I got to do that for almost 10 years. Prior to that, I was a consultant for a previous business that focused still working with nonprofits and tribal organizations. And then prior to that, I was rooted in a grassroots organization. So I worked for a Native CDFI that was bringing mortgage opportunities to my tribal nation, which is the Navajo Nation. So lots of components there. So like I said, I've been working, my career spans about 29 years of doing different components of working in tribal communities. So I'm so honored to be here with you all to share space and share information about organizational diagnostics. So I'm going to go into the next slide here. And this is just where I want to get a feel for who we all have in the virtual room here. So I do see your name, so you don't necessarily have to type your name, but let me know where you're joining from. So I'm here in Rio Rancho, which is just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then I also want you to share one word that describes your perception of what your organization's energy is right now. And so when I talk about energy, it could be something like, we're busy, we're putting out fires, we're growing, we're transitioning, we're steady, we're solid. So whatever descriptor that you can utilize to describe your organization's energy from your perspective, from your viewpoint. So we'll see that as we come into the chat space here. And so Antoinette, thank you for kicking us off. So Nez Perce Tribe, you're busy, right? And I feel like that's a constant in a lot of work that we do, right? There's a never ending amount of work, right? Growing through transition, right? That's an important phase. We're busy, we're transitioning, and transitioning could be like different levels of transitioning, right? We might be coming in new to the space as an employee. We might be transitioning to offering different products and services, maybe even offering to different markets. Growing through transitioning, busy, yes, definitely. So some really good descriptors around the energy, right? And these are all fine. These are all great things, right? We all go through different experiences. And right now, Terry, you're aligning, right? Finding alignment. And so curiosities may have come up when you heard about the title of this, like what exactly is a diagnostic? Sounds very clinical, very technical of a term. So we're going to kind of break this apart to make it a little more digestible, right? And so going into the learning objectives, thank you, and continue to add to the chat. I love seeing like how you describe the energy around your organization. So we're going to look at the learning objectives for today's session. And these are going to be kind of our guidelines, our things that we want to keep in mind as we're spending the next 90 minutes together. So first, we're going to evaluate the structures and processes that affect our services, and whether that's housing services or a different type of services, we're going to talk about that. So we're going to basically like look under the hood of the car, right? We're going to look at the systems that maybe we do or do not have in place, the policies that support those systems that maybe we do and do not have, or maybe they're in development, and the communication channels that really help shape how we serve our target market, the communities, right? And then secondly, we'll identify areas for improvement and engagement. I think this is a really important piece in order to have that alignment, to have these shifts, to support the transition, right? So it does sound a little technical, but it's really about taking the time to ask, like, where can we show up better as a department, as a team, as an organization, and ultimately for our clients, for our target market, for our internal team, for our communities, right? And then third, we want to develop strategies that incorporate all of these cultural strengths, because we're so rooted, many of us are rooted in tribal communities. And so we have that influence. And we want to lean into that, right? We want to serve as a tribal organization or a Native organization, leaning into the values, what's important to us and what's important to the community, taking into consider traditions, right? And then also really leaning into the relationships that we're cultivating within our departments or within our tribal communities. So we're going to pull, so instead of like pulling culture, tradition from operations, we're going to try and merge the two. We're going to kind of weave them together. And then the last one is to create the action plans that really support implementation and effectiveness, right? I always feel, and this is partly through my own personal experience, that I feel like a lot of times when we attend informational sessions, whether it's a training, a webinar, we're sitting in a conference, maybe we're doing strategic planning, or we're having an internal type of training. We have an opportunity to really get excited about what the potential of utilizing a tool or this new information in the organization. But then when we get back to the day-to-day of like just working, kind of being amidst the client work, and my inbox is looking crazy, emails are coming in because I took 2 days to do some professional development. How do we implement this information? How do we move it forward? And I always feel like that's like a challenge in taking this information and putting it to work. So we're going to spend some time on that, because I really believe that implementation piece is so important in order to really support what we're going to learn about today. So with that, seeing the learning objectives on the slide, I want you to share which one of these objectives feels most relevant for you and the organization maybe that you're representing right now. So is it evaluating systems? Is it improving engagement? Is it bringing in more culture and tradition? Or is it creating that action plan? So drop that in the chat. Where do you feel like your kind of purpose right now sitting in this, once we went through the learning objectives, which one do you feel like is going to be most beneficial to you in your organization? So go ahead and type that in the chat. We're going to be using the chat a lot, so just be prepared to type. Thank you, Linda, for kicking us off here. So improving engagement is an important piece for you all. And William, evaluating structures and processes. Terry is action planning, right? Dave is evaluating structures and processes. What else are you guys thinking about? Improvement in engagement. Thank you, Antoinette. Caitlin, and the evaluating stage, right? And there's, and maybe it's like a little fuzzy right now. Maybe it's like, well, I'm not sure. I'm new to this whole space, or maybe I'm new to the organization, so I'm not quite sure. And that's okay too, because as we're going to talk through each of these pieces, certain things may click a little more. And at the end of our time together, you may be thinking like, oh man, yes, I need the action plan, or yes, I need to do the engagement piece more, right? More time and attention there. Awesome. So thank you for adding to the chat and sharing that. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's jump into some content pieces here. And so here we have the circle of work. And so I just want you to kind of sit with this, sit with the phrase here. When the circle is strong, the work is light. So when I was thinking of and putting together this content, I was wanting something that kind of illustrated and was readable to like what this content piece is. And so we all carry so much knowledge, so much wisdom that applies to the work that we're doing in community and housing, right? And so when we think about what our circle is, that can be like relationships within our team dynamic. It could be relationships with external partners. It's the communication between everyone within that circle. And it's really like articulating and moving forward what the purpose is. Like, what is that shared vision, right? And so when all of these folks, partners, people in our circle, when we all are supporting that work and that same vision to move us forward, the work tends to be a lot lighter, right? When we're all moving in the same direction. So, and then the opposite can happen too. So when that circle structure weakens, this is when we start seeing trust kind of maybe start eroding and disintegrating. Maybe there's breakdown in communication and people start feeling more disconnected. This is when the work starts feeling a little more heavy. It's more difficult. And sometimes we feel discouraged in, like, what is our purpose? How are we moving towards that purpose? So when we think about that organization circle that we've cultivated, so this is you individually with the work that you're doing, I want you to think about what that looks like right now. And think about your circle. Is it pretty solid right now? Is it strong? Is it tight? Is it stretched? Is it not a circle so much? Does it have gaps, missing pieces, right? Maybe it's a little frayed in certain areas. So I want you to share and definitely, hopefully, that you're feeling that this is a safe space to kind of share like honest observations or honest perceptions of where you view your organization right now. So you can use one word in the chat. So thinking about your circle, your current circle, what do you feel that descriptor would be of it? Is it solid? Are you rebuilding? Some of you said you're like transitioning, maybe you're finding balance, or maybe you're unsure of who's all in your circle, right? You can't even articulate maybe what my circle looks like. So drop that in the chat, and I'd love to see where you kind of view what your current circle looks like. Thank you, William. So maybe in the space of identifying your circle, right? Who are my partners? Who's my team? Who do I lean into, right? Who is sharing the purpose of what I'm doing as a collective, right? Within the department, or even within my tribe, right? Stretched with strength. I love that image, right? So it's kind of like we're maybe pushing in all areas. Maybe we're expanding, we're growing, we're adding services, but we're still holding strong, even though maybe we're getting a little more full here. Finding my footing inside the circle, right? So it might not be just trying to identify the circle. It's like, well, where do I fit? Where do I use my services, maybe, right? Where do I use my knowledge and experience? And then Dave, my circle is an oval, right? So maybe it's being stretched in certain areas. And so maybe this is a time we can like observe and align to where we kind of come back to that circle, right? So it's not disproportionate, right? Strong but incomplete. Yeah. And then Antoinette has a circle that maybe has gaps, right? So, and those are really good images and descriptors of maybe like how this process is going to start. And so, like I said, when we're going back to our departments, going back to work, these can be like images that you share. Like during this webinar, like one of the things that I identified was that my circle, and you would give some background and tee up as you're sharing back maybe to your team. But this is a good way for you to even ask your team members, like, where do you see your circle? Where do you see the circle of the work that we're doing, right? And so people will have different descriptors, and it's a good way to kind of have that information shared back collectively, right? And it's okay to have different types of images of the circle, because we all have different roles and responsibilities within the organization, right? And so the important thing is that you're present and you've made a decision to tend to the circle, right? So if you have an oval, it's like, okay, where is it disproportionate? What is representing the two areas that maybe are not fully forming that circle? Where are the gaps, right? Like, where do I fit in this? What makes the most sense? So this gives you an opportunity to really reflect and get feedback from other team members. Okay, so let's move into this next piece. So I want to definitely give you enough grounding knowledge and background to what organizational diagnostics is, the why, and the how, right? So it's going to be our level setting here and our springboard to go into some additional content. So now that we talked about like kind of that circle and what it looks like and how ideally we want it to be a really strong circle, we want to listen to the folks that are a part of that circle, right? And maybe we're not sure who is in that circle, or I'm trying to figure out where I fit. This is really the heart of what organizational diagnostics is. So you want to think of a diagnostic as a checkup for your organization. And I always feel like this is so beneficial for nonprofits, for departments, for tribes to do this assessment to find out like what's working, what's not, why, and how do we start making shifts to either repair maybe something that's broken, shore up certain things, improve certain areas, or maybe we're doing really well and we want to continue that momentum, right? And so this diagnostic gives us an opportunity to really have a structured way of listening to the folks in the organization. And we will always want to remember it's not about blame or judgment, like, oh, it's because so-and-so is not doing this, or this department is causing this backlog. So we want to use it as a tool for awareness, right? And we want to be able to extract patterns maybe that are happening where energy process, maybe clients are flowing easily. And then we can also have the opportunity to identify where things are getting bottlenecked or stuck, or maybe it comes to a standstill, right? And so organizations can generally start looking at this diagnostic process when certain symptoms start showing up. And we're going to talk about some of like, what are those symptoms, right? What are some things that I need to be aware of that may trigger like, hey, I think we need to spend some time and attention in diagnosing what's going on with our organization or our department. So some of the common symptoms that come up when we're thinking about like, oh, it might be a good time to do a diagnostic is maybe we have a lot of staff turnover, right? Or maybe we're having the energy from folks that are still working with us, but they're feeling burnout, right? So maybe the turnover and burnout is higher than what we usually see. Maybe the communication across departments or even within our team has become inconsistent. Maybe projects keep stalling, or we see that priorities are shifting within that project to prevent like momentum forward. And then one of the most common ones that I hear when folks are, when I'm providing like technical assistance or working with organizations is that morale can feel really low within the department or within that organization. And people tend to not speak up anymore. They kind of lose interest in the mission and the why, right? There may be a disconnect from that mission and vision, right? From the employee to what our purpose is and what are we doing here. And so when we start seeing these patterns, we're feeling some of these things, this is usually one of those red flags or one of those yellow cautionary lights that come up. It's basically a signal to you and your organization that we need to do a little digging here. We need to be heard, right? And so if you're a leader within the organization, a diagnostic is really going to give you a way to respond to what folks are needing and wanting. Okay. So we're going to talk about, we're going to shift into the why. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to start internally within the organization, because we want to strengthen from within. So taking time and having the opportunity to really reflect inwardly within the organization, this is where we're going to start building trust and teeing up and getting the folks ready across the organization for this diagnostic. So when people start seeing that they're being heard and their voices matter and that leadership is willing to listen, it really starts to rebuild connection within that department or team, that organization, and it starts rebuilding confidence. So we don't want to skip this step, and we don't want to rush to the end of the how. Like, how are we going to do this? We want to take time to be very intentional, to really sitting with the why, right? And if we rush to the how, we're going to end up in the same situation. So we want to be intentional in this process. So when we get to the how, you began small and reflective. So what does that mean? So it doesn't mean you have to start with a formal survey or a big, huge consulting process that comes in and does this. We can do a lot of things internally that don't require an outside facilitator. You can start with just listening, hearing from your team, hearing from the department. This can be like listening circles, staff meeting conversations, story circles, or even having like an anonymous way that they can provide feedback to you all. Some simple questions to really generate and get this started is, what are we doing that's working well, right? And where do we feel a disconnect? Do we feel disconnected here? And what might make our work feel more joyful or lighter? So the goal to all of this is to really surface what's real, and then ultimately really bringing balance back to this circle, right? So when we think about the what, the why, and the how, I want you to share like maybe a curiosity that you have within your organization, right? So think about like how a diagnostic might help your organization, kind of knowing like what the what is, what the why is, and the how. Where do you feel like you may benefit the most from out of these three categories? Just right now with the limited information that you have available. And you can type that in the chat. The starting point. Yep. Sage. Yeah. So just starting from the very beginning, right? Where else do y'all feel is a good place that you're at right now? I see people typing, so I'll just wait a little bit. Community needs. Mm-hmm. Thinking about the foundation of the organization and build it from the base, right? Why? Get the buy-in, right? Yeah, there's lots of reasons why we want to start with that, right? We want to start internally. There's a lot of benefit there because we're going to start doing a little bit of self-reflection internally, right? We're going to build the trust. We're going to create alignment with the purpose and the mission. And then we're getting them ready for any potential change that may be happening based on this diagnostic, right? Awesome. Okay, great. So we're going to dig a little deeper into each of those areas. So we want to talk about like why start internally, right? So before we can really strengthen our systems or improve our housing services or improve any type of service that maybe our organization is offering, we have to look inward, right? And this is important. And I know I've worked in organizations, I ran a nonprofit, and being a leader to kind of manage all of this, sometimes that can be an uncomfortable space to kind of like think about, what do people view about the organization? What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? What are we challenged with, right? To have those hard conversations. Trust me, once we kind of work through that, it can be so extremely helpful, and it can really bring cohesiveness to the team. So we really want to look at how our organization functions, how our organization communicates internally, and how we connect internally. So we're going to look at from different components of this process. So really looking from the level of awareness, looking at how we want to reflect, how we want to implement strategy, and how do we hit the implementation phase and putting things into action. So each component will have like different pieces that fall into one of the 4 categories, right? So we want to, first of all, like we're in the awareness phase of this. So we want to evaluate the organizational structures and processes affecting the services that we're providing, whether it's housing or any other type of service. So when we're thinking and talking about evaluating structures, we're really asking, do our systems help us serve people, or are they slowing us down, right? And I'll give you a really simple example from my own personal experience in running a nonprofit. We always went back and we had to tweak services. We had to tweak the way that we were offering our services. And one of, like, depending on the amount, the number of funders that you have available, funders want to see impact data, right? And so if you have 4 or 5 different grants funding this, this program, or maybe you have an investor, maybe you have loans that you've acquired to operate and maybe roll out money. So you have different requirements to meet, and they all want different information. So in our thinking of this process, like, hey, we need to capture all of this demographic data, all of this holistic data, because all of these different funding sources require this information. So we thought, well, let's just do this in an intake form. So when people were coming into the organization, we had a 5-page legal size front and back intake form. Tons of data we were collecting on the front end. One thing we saw where people were coming in the door curious about what we were offering, but we were never getting, I think we had like a 25% return on those intake applications. And so when we sat with the team, we were trying to figure out, how do we keep those numbers and bring more folks to return the application? And finally, it was like, well, the application's too lengthy, right? That intake form is too lengthy. So we turned it into a 1-pager, and we got a lot more folks moving into the next phase of the process, right? And so we had to have that opportunity to really look at our data. We mined our own internal data. And then what was the objective, and what was holding us back, right? What was causing this bottleneck? So when we evaluate those organizational structures and processes, this is where we can do a lot of like troubleshooting, right? We're looking at how these applications flow, how decisions are made, where communication might be getting lost. So it may not necessarily be tearing things apart, but it's really giving us an opportunity to put that magnifying glass or shining a light on how we can make this workflow a lot more efficient. So we're able to start seeing clearly what's happening inside the organization and how it's impacting us serving our community, and where we can make adjustments, right? So you might be looking at policies and procedures that you have in place, right? What's working, what's not working. The second piece is really identifying areas for improvement in service delivery and community engagement. So starting internally is really going to help build trust and readiness for these changes. So we want to look at any internal challenges that we have. So maybe within the team, there's a little bit of confusion. Maybe we're not sure like about the process. Maybe we don't have an SOP on the process within our department. Maybe we've never had procedures develop and outlined. So when you think about new people coming into the circle, like what information will help onboard them a lot better? So people need to learn and understand their roles and responsibilities, but part of leadership and part of this team dynamic is really identifying the process, right? And having it kind of that written guidance for folks. And so this aids in any miscommunication. This really supports how we work with clients and other partners within our circle. So when our teams are feeling in alignment, we have clarity to the process and the procedures, we have clear communication routes established. The service delivery to our target market feels more human, more grounded, and more consistent. And your recipients will definitely feel that and see that. The third one is to develop strategies that incorporate cultural strengths into the organizational practices. So within our tribal departments, tribes, or organizations that are working with tribal members, we know what is important to our people. Generally, we have a pretty good pulse on what's important to our community members. One is relationship-based, right? Our community members have to trust the team, right? Because generally we're asking for a lot of personal information. And depending on the size of our community, we may have a smaller community where everybody knows everyone. So trust is really, really important. Or maybe we're serving a larger tribal community, but we still want to cultivate that relationship and build trust, right? We want to show respect and also deem respect for the services that we're offering, right? So we have that reciprocity established. We also want to make sure that we weave the cultural strengths into our processes internally within the organization. So maybe this means, like, what is the process and procedure for staff meetings? How do we onboard new folks? How do we communicate within the team? And how do we hold each other accountable? So having this as a daily practice that is modeled and identified within the organization really supports number 3, right? And then the last one, create action plans to enhance the effectiveness of housing programs or services that we're offering. So this is really where we can take that reflection into action. So once we know what we're doing, what our strengths are, and what needs more time and attention, we can create an action plan that takes these steps moving forward. So it might be as simple as redesigning the workflow, redesigning that intake process that I talked about, right? Going from a 5-page legal document to a 1-page letter-sized document is going to improve the workflow. Maybe we need to clarify staff roles and responsibilities. Maybe we just spend some time reflecting on our strengths and challenges and have those conversations in staff meetings. Maybe it's a quick check-in with the team, but we really need to have these internal checkpoints. And this is what's going to really support building that trust, that accountability, and it's going to strengthen the circle and create alignment within the circle. So this is part of that first step of really becoming aware of what's working and what might not be working, right? And then going into this next slide, the balancing systems and spirit. So we're still in that awareness phase, but one of the biggest lessons in organizational health and organizational diagnostic, and especially in tribal communities, is the balance between that system and spirit. And so healthy organizations are just like healthy people. Like when we think about our overall kind of physical, mental, spiritual health, we need the structure, right, that support that and build that and nurture that, right? So when we think about health in an organization, we do need structure, which are your policies, your procedures. You still need that that structure, but we don't want to get so rigid that that's all we are, right? That's all we're cultivating is the structure, the process. Through all of those policies and procedures, but we also want to cultivate the connection portion of that. So, and that's the spirit side of it, right? We want our team members to be inspired. We want them to feel passionate about the work that they're doing. But we also want that consistency. We want the accountability, and we want that flow within the organization that feels a little easier than heavy, right? And hard work. So when we all work together within the team, within the organization definitely starts feeling more in balance. So with that, the systems can provide that clarity. So when we think, just remember, systems are like the policies and the procedures, things that kind of have the structure to it. That's going to give your team the direction, the organization, the direction, the predictability. It might look like clear housing intake procedures. It might be the clear reporting requirements, or those defined roles that really keep everyone in the know of who's doing what. We also want to look at the relationships that really bring trust, creativity, and care. This reminds us that we're all together in this circle. We're all working towards the same purpose and mission. And so this can be staff, this can be our leaders within the team. This could be, maybe we have a board of commissioners, maybe we have a board of directors. Maybe we're accountable to the community, right? And so we want these strong relationships and systems to really support that relationship building so that it doesn't feel cold or transactional, right? The third one is the purpose. This is going to connect us to the why of the work that we're doing, right? So it's that deeper reason. So it may be like it aligns with the values that I have. I really want to give back to my community. This is important to my family. I look at my community as an extension of family. I'm aware of building services and opportunities for future generations, right? So this is our purpose. This is really what's keeping us moving forward, even when resources, financial resources, human capacity, maybe it's tight, we don't have enough, but we're all sharing in those values to keep things moving forward. And then the last one here is the culture. This is what keeps the work grounded in those community values, right? So, and this can be as easy as having an opening prayer or an opening reflection to staff meetings, team meetings, board meetings, incorporating humor. We tend to love to have stories tied to humor, right? Building decisions through consensus, right? Having to hear others' opinions, their thoughts, being open to that dialogue, right? And really keeping us grounded in who we are and the purpose of what we're doing. So when we have these things balanced and we have like good structure and we're honoring the spirit within that structure, this is where the organization work feels really healthy, right? The organization is operating with efficiency, with little difficulty. And so things just are moving a lot smoother in flow, right? So with that, we want to go into, we're still in awareness, but this is a circle of organizational health. So we want to think about a tool that helps us determine, like, where are we? How do we visualize that balance? So when we think of like a circle, a wheel for your organization, we want to look at how we assess like the physical, the emotional, the spiritual health in people. We can apply that to the organizational health. So when we look at these 4 different quadrants, I want you to think of one with entitled purpose and direction. And then we have people and relationships, structure and flow, and then culture and spirit. So when we think about the purpose and direction, this is going to be our North Star. This is going to be the mission, the vision, the goals that we're working towards. This is going to be what everyone is connected to, the why of the work. So when this quadrant is strong, people feel aligned and motivated in the work that they're doing. When we look at the next quadrant, the people in relationships, this is where the relationships between staff, between leadership, between our board, between the community, this is where we're building trust and communication and collaboration, right? So when this quadrant is healthy, people feel valued and heard. Looking at the next structure, the next quadrant, the structure and flow, this really represents those systems we talked about, the processes we talked about, and the clarity that makes the work happen, right? And it makes it happen smoothly. So these are the things that give shape to the spirit of the work. And then the last one, the culture and spirit, this is really the heartbeat of like the human aspect of things. This is where our values lie. This is maybe where we pull in culture and tradition. This is where we have that value of care for community. And it really is that reminder of how we want to show up for the work that we're doing. So when culture and spirit are strong, people will bring their whole selves, their passionate selves to the work, right? And so all of these quadrants influence one another, right? And so if one is weak, the others start feeling it too. So this is why we want to look at all the different quadrants and give it time and attention to really make them strong, right? We really want to have this balance. And so part of the diagnostic is looking at these different areas to determine, hey, I think we really need to spend some time and attention to this quadrant, or 2 of these quadrants, 3 of these quadrants, the whole enchilada here, right? We need to look at all of them, right? And so thinking from your perspective and kind of where you're at in your organization, where do you feel is your strongest quadrant right now? So where do you feel strength within your organization in these quadrants? So it's either I feel like we're really strong in purpose and direction, or we're really strong in people and relationships, and so on and so forth. So I want to see that in the chat. Where do you feel like your organization or your department is the strongest right now? Retha, yes, definitely purpose and direction. People in relationship, William. So we're going into some strengths here. Think about, what are our strengths? Where do we feel like our organization is has really put some time and attention? People in values, people in relationships, yeah. Definitely. I love seeing this. So many of us have like similar kind of quadrants that are showing up, right? And part of this whole diagnostic process for you sitting through it is becoming aware of knowing where we're at right now, right? Awesome. Values, staff capacity, involvement from the community, definitely people in relationships. Unfortunately, there is a huge communication gap between us and the front office and our director. Yeah. And sometimes it may feel siloed, like, oh, that front facing department is siloed and I'm not sure what's going on. We don't talk. We don't have these kind of walking through how do we create efficiencies, right? So sometimes it's those internal kind of nuances and structure that maybe keep us siloed or keep us from communicating with one another. Awesome. So thank you for feeding into the chat with this. So now that we've identified what quadrant feels strong, I want you to think about, what quadrant do you think needs a little more care? So where would we shine a light on the quadrant? We've identified which one feels really strong, but which one needs a little more nurturing from your perspective of your organization? So type that in the chat. Thank you, Retha. So looking at spending a little more time and attention, shining a light on structure and flow, right? Same thing with William. Ooh, Dave, culture and spirit. Anthony, all four. Very honest answer. Yep. All four for Carmen. Structure and flow. Definitely. Wonderful. All four. And so this can be like a simple activity that you can do within like a staff meeting. You can share this information, give a little bit of background, and have them do a little mini check-in, just like I did here. Ask them like, what quadrant do you think we're really strong in, right? And what needs a little more time and attention, right? Retha, sometimes it'll lead, I question my own skill sets. I have a good structure, then things should align better. A big challenge to me. That is such an honest reflection, Retha, because being in a leadership position has its challenges and it has its rewards, right? And so part of the awareness is like definitely taking a look inwardly at us as well, us individually, like what are my strong suits here and what are my growth edges, right? And so having that kind of fall in alignment in these four quadrants, right? And I'm big on team development and organizational development as well. And so this can like feed in. And I did a webinar Tuesday. And we talked a little bit about like personality assessments and work styles and how that shows up in a team and how it can impact the work that we're doing. And so part of that is really helpful in this same setting. So really understanding who is on our team, what kind of work styles do we have? What kind of communication styles do we have? And so learning more about our team is really going into like one of those first pieces of building trust and relationship with the team so that we can start having these conversations of what's working, what's not, what are our strengths, what are some of our weaknesses and challenges, right? And so that's a really good level of awareness. And I think that's so key in part of this organizational diagnostics. So we want everyone to be aware of what they're bringing to the table and what is their growth edge and how do we lean into that growth area, right? So thank you for sharing that, Retha. That's definitely something that I've experienced and also have witnessed within organizations as well. Okay, so let's go into kind of taking a peek into the well, like what does it look like when a circle is in balance and when a circle has imbalance. So every organization, we talked a little bit earlier in a few previous slides, like what are some of those symptoms that show up, right? And so every organization will give off signals about its organizational health, just the way people do, like, oh, my back hurts. I have this consistent pain in my knee, or I have chronic headaches, chronic fatigue, whatever the symptom is presenting, organizations will show these different symptoms too. So, and then when we're balanced, we can also still feel that. So remember, when we're in balance, that's a healthy organization, right? A healthy circle. When we're imbalanced, this is where those symptoms are showing that we're not healthy. We're kind of feeling, I'm ailing right now. I'm not feeling 100%, right? So if we apply it to like our physical, personal health, and apply it to an organization, we have things that show up and can be like those little signals like, hey, I need to go get this checked, right? So when we look on the left on the slide, we see what a healthy circle feels like, right? So there's clarity. People understand their roles and responsibilities within that department or the organization. There's trust flowing through, right? So this is across the staff, the team, the department, from leadership to the staff members, and from the community into the organization. And then there's also that grounded purpose. So everyone is always remembering and motivated by the why of the work and why the work matters. So when all of these pieces are strong, the organization can move through challenges with a lot more flexibility and care. So looking to the right side of the slide, where these are signs of an imbalance circle, this is when we start seeing the burnout. Staff feels stretched thin. Staff is maybe juggling a lot more than what their job description entails, right? And maybe our organization or department is constantly operating in crisis mode, right? We're putting out fires here, get that situated, and oh, here goes another one. Let's do that. And sometimes we have multiple fires going on, right? And so we're constantly just managing that. So we're not able to sit in a healthy circle. This can be where we see silos of people in departments, people within that organization. This is where they stop sharing information. And I think someone did share that before, like the front office from maybe the main department to the executive director. They're silos, right? The communication is not flowing. Information is not going all the way through the organization. And then teamwork starts dissolving, and we're operating independently and individually versus as a collective. We may also see like unclear roles, right? So what is my responsibility? What is the individual's responsibility? What is their role within the organization? Is anything needing to shift, or is it fuzzy and blurry? Do we not have that clear communication, creating confusion and frustration within the team? And Retha, I do see, like, why do people do that? That's a really interesting question. There could be a number of reasons, but even just seeing, like, this is where a diagnostic can be helpful. So when we get curious about why is this behavior happening? Why is this going on? This is where a diagnostic can be really, really helpful. So we find out, like, I've done diagnostics with organizations, and what's really helpful is having someone be able to talk with the team, right? And it's kind of comparable to like a SWOT interview. So looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but also taking it a level deeper, like having the facilitator or the consultant that's working with you on this, or maybe it's just the supervisor or the leader, depending on how much trust is cultivated in that organization. They might be able to ask, like, hey, Linnell, like, how do you feel about the organization? Like, rank your morale on what you think here. What's unclear? Do you understand your roles and responsibilities? What do you feel like? What is your job function versus your job description, right? How do you feel about leadership? How do you feel about compensation, right? And so a diagnostic will do like a deeper interview with individuals to really find out what's motivating the behavior. One, is it personality, or one, is it lack of structure, right? Or one, is it leadership? So you're able to cultivate and pick that out and find out what's kind of going on within the organization. But your curiosity about like the why is a really important piece in the awareness and reflection side of it. So this is where we can start asking those curious questions in a non-aggressive way or a non-confrontational way, which is why I feel like it's so important to have that trust built within the team first, so that you can have these kind of conversations. So it's not a one and done, like, oh, let's just do, and I hear this is my own personal experience, is that people will say, we have low morale on the team, Linnell, we need conflict resolution. and we need some team building. And they feel like team building is going to fix all of these things. A lot of times it's kind of digging deeper to find out, why is some of this stuff happening? Why is this coming up? And it's not, the Band-Aid is not team building. It's finding out what the root is, the root cause. So it could be like just the same as going to a doctor. They're like, oh, you just need to eat better, or you just need to stretch every morning, without ever asking anything deeper, right? Not asking, like, what might this be rooted in? How long has this been happening? Are there other things that are coming up for you? And so once we start digging a little deeper, just like a doctor might ask more curious questions to find out, oh, this sounds a little more, I'm losing the word here. Like we need to do a little more work here. Let's get a couple more tests involved, right? So this is what a diagnostic is going to do. But you can see like why people do that. It may be like they don't understand what their role or function is. They may like have too much on their plate, right? Or maybe not having good communication. So there's a lot of things that can feed into that why. Long response for that one question, but this is where that curiosity comes within a diagnostic. Okay. So one of the things too that I think is an easy way to look at the balance and imbalance with our team is taking this little visual, bringing it back to the team, rate each quadrant 1 through 5. 1 needs some attention, 5 we're pretty strong in, and then have that conversation around it. Have the discussion. What needs care? What's one small shift that we can make, right? So it's not about grading the people in the organization or grading or rating the organization. It's like taking a pulse to what's going on. So we're becoming more aware of what's working well and what's not, right? And so this will give you an opportunity to really bring in a really simple tool to the people in your organization to kind of do that individualized assessment, to kind of springboard into like, what else do we need to start doing? How can we incorporate other things, right? So you would take a few moments to go ahead and do that. And I want you to, and we did this like just before, but I'd like for you to like take a picture of this. And I can send a sample PDF to Jasmine, and we can have that as a resource as well, so that you can definitely utilize that moving forward as a tool that you can incorporate into the work that you're doing. Okay. Did we have a question or anything coming up for folks? No? Okay. All right, let's go into the next slide. So based on where you all rated earlier, like you rated which quadrant felt the strongest, which one needs more attention. Let's go into that next question. What surprised you about your organizational imbalance from your viewpoint? Is there anything that you're curious about? Anything that was surprising to you? Like, oh, I've never even thought about this, right? I've never put it in quadrants. And then how does this connect you to community and the people that you serve, right? And so sometimes that strongest quadrant shows our foundation on what we can build on. Other times, the area that needs attention reveals where the organization is sending a message, right? This is where we need to put some healing work with the team, maybe, right? Or we need clarity around process, roles, and responsibilities, right? So I want you to share like anything that came out like an aha as we were walking through some of these things. And also, did anything shift as we walk through a little more deeper into it? Like, do you still feel like that one area is the strongest area, or that one area needs more time and attention? what was a reflection that maybe came up for you? And you can drop that in the chat, or you can unmute. We haven't had a chance to unmute. So if you can do that too, that'll be a nice change up here. Either type in the chat or unmute. I think the last one is a really good, curious question. Like, how does this connect to your community and the people you serve? Because we can become very focused internally, but all that we're doing internally has an impact to the community or the target market that we're serving. So maybe we can think about that last question. I see a couple of people typing, so I'm going to wait a little bit and see what pops up. Oh, Rita, not sure how to unmute. I think there's a little microphone at the bottom of your screen or near your picture, maybe.
Yes, Rita, you would have to rejoin and turn your mic on if you would like to speak.
Okay. So if you want to type in the chat too, we can do that. Whatever's easiest.
That works too.
I see a couple of other people typing, so we'll give it a couple of seconds here to see what pops up. I'm curious to see what you all are sharing. How does this connect to your community and the people you serve? And I always feel like in these, in this process, it's so important on the front end to kind of like find the why, to have those interviews, to talk with people, to be open to like looking at the strengths and weaknesses, but also giving folks an opportunity to reflect is just as important, because this is where we can brainstorm and look at different ways of making adjustments and what feels right, for us. How do we align our values with the work that we're doing? Kimberly, our tribal housing is without a leader. Our housing director quit, and now our homeownership program is on hold. It does affect our tribal members, especially during the times we are living in. Yes, transition can be disruptive in organizations, especially if we're not strong in those different quadrants, right? It can impact, like it has a multiplier effect. Organizations that are healthy, what we generally will see is that they have a succession plan, they have a transition plan for leadership positions so that we don't miss too many steps. We don't have like a pullback of services because we lose an individual, right? And so this can be a good way to look at, hey, we need to shore up in different areas, because we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know who's going to leave the organization and the impact that it can cause for the work that we're doing. So if we have maybe a succession plan, we have a process in place to really support anyone transitioning out of the organization, so we don't lose too many steps in our service delivery, right? So it'd be a good time to kind of evaluate process and procedures, what's worked, what's not worked, and also even thinking about the impact of losing a key position within the organization. That can be part of this diagnostic as well. And Rita, were you able to jump in audio? I thought I saw something.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let's look at your thoughts.
Well, when you talked about the strength, like we're strong in formulating. We're working on a native CDFI New York State, so the purpose is there, the direction is there. And I feel like we often, because of workflow, because of just all the stuff that we have to get done, and even in my prior job, the culture aspect, spiritual aspect of things was on a back burner. And I think it's because of all the work that we had to accomplish in such small amounts. I feel like now that I'm formulating our own an organization from the ground up, that, and you're right, it's balance, right? It's balance between the purpose, direction, structure, flow, and all your human resources. That those relationships are super important. And so is the culture and spirit of the organization. So I've struggled with that part of it. I was always cognizant of people's gifts and relationships, and really want to cultivate that even more. But I feel like those two areas have been, they're things that we take care of if we have time. So I would like to be able to cultivate all those areas so that we can have a more balanced organization. And because it's just starting out, there's like 0.7 part-time equivalents right now on a very small grant. And I want to do it right. You know what I mean? I want to be able to do things that reflect family, culture, everything that I didn't work on as a housing director before. I want to make sure these things are covered. So that balance is going to be super, super important going forward.
Yes, so many good takeaways from that, Retha. One of the things that I talked about on Tuesday's webinar, and I believe NLC has them banked somewhere to where you can access it. I'll let them talk about that. But one of the things we talked about was like the stages of organizations. Like newer organizations are in the forming stage. So lots of things happen there. We're building relationship, we're doing things. And one of the things too is that it tends to be all hands on deck, right? Because we're creating an organization. Maybe we're creating that CDFI. So it takes a lot of capacity and resources focused on that, right? So maybe our forming stage or the information about relationship building is looking more externally because we're limited staff capacity, but we're trying to build partners, build relationships with these folks to really support the creation of the CDFI. So it is finding that balance, and that can be a hard thing, right? But one cool thing that I want to pick out of what you shared is that level of awareness to like, hey, these are all important pieces. This is what we're focusing on right now, but we do want to cultivate and give some care to these areas, right?
Yes.
And they're all beneficial, right?
Yes.
They're all beneficial. And so part of it is having the strategy to the how, right? How do we do this with, I'm still in the same position, I still have the same people, we still have the same things on the table, but how do I prioritize it? And that's the difficult balance, I think, to finding, like, how do we implement this? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that on the next couple of slides, but I really appreciate you being able to share that, right? And
Great.
Terry, yes, forming, storming, norming, and performing were the stages of an organization. And how they kind of evolve and how they navigate that circle, right? So thank you for that, right? You guys are feeding into the chat. I think that's super helpful, like how it's impacting the community, which is a strong consideration. We're all front community serving organizations, so that's an important piece. How is what's going on internally in the organization impacting the customer, right? Impacting the client. So we have to be aware of that. And maybe this is where the diagnostic can be helpful. And we come back to the table and figure out, like, what is the result and how is it impacting our purpose, impacting our clients, right? The people that we're serving, that we were created to serve. So I want to also, I'm watching the time here, so I want to make sure that I get through my last couple of slides, and then hopefully we have a little more time for Q&A, if at all. So how do we use this tool inside the organization? So one, there is benefit to bringing in a facilitator, bringing in someone that can navigate this. one thing I would consider on that, that being a consideration, is that if we haven't really cultivated trust within the organization, sometimes having an outside person that's unbiased and like is not going to pick sides, and you have that piece removed, that can be really helpful in getting honest feedback, honest answers to what's going on within the organization. If you have cultivated a good level of trust and people are able to share information and have those maybe difficult conversations and bring up topics that maybe hard to share in some instances, you can still have like a team leader, a board member, or a director navigate the diagnostic. So it really depends on what you feel is going on internally within the organization, and how much honest feedback will you be able to get if it was done internally versus bringing someone in to help navigate this process. But here are just some ways that you can incorporate into the organization currently, whether you're a leader or a team member. So you can start small. You don't have to do a full assessment right away. So maybe at your next team meeting, your next staff meeting, maybe it's a board retreat, introduce the circle as a conversational tool, right? So you can share and ask, out of these quadrants, list the 4 quadrants and have them have that conversation. What feels strongest for us right now? And which one might need a little more time and attention? You can print, you can draw. Thank you. I did see that the slides are available, so you can actually just grab the image off the slide, paste it onto a Word doc, and then you have a handout, right? So you can do it as experiential kind of activity. Maybe we blow it up and we have it on a flip chart or on a magic wall, and then people can get up and put like where they feel your organization is the strongest, right? So use it as a tool as part of that conversation starter. You want to listen across teams. So this step can be really powerful. So, and especially for those that mentioned that, like, hey, the front person doesn't know what's going on in our department, and the ED is like removed from all of these different areas, right? And so different parts of your organization, different people in the organization can often see things differently, right? So you might have leadership, staff, board members, your intake person, your admin folks, your financial folks. They will all have unique perspectives of this, these different quadrants. So this is a good way to have everyone have that feedback, and then you can see like maybe where there's gaps, right? So this diagnostic is going to help bridge those internal perspectives through that conversation, and really managing and navigating any conflict or communication issues. The third one, bring in community voices. So we're front-serving community-based organizations. We want to hear from the community, right? So maybe this can be a tool to use with our clients, with our partners, or with community members. You can use the same quadrant structure. You can gather information through short surveys, through interviews, through listening circles, focus groups. So this is gonna, you'll be able to connect what you hear from the outside and what your team brought in internally, right? So this will give you like a better picture fully of the organization's health. You can also visualize what you've learned. Once you've gathered all this insight, you've identified strengths, weaknesses, you can map them out visually. You can color code them. I love experiential kind of learning and facilitation, because people have different ways of taking in information. So if you can have like the visual kind of aspect there, and getting people to contribute and communicate, have conversation, small groups to have conversation, collective debriefs, this can be really helpful. If you do a SWOT analysis, SWOT interviews, you can bring back the themes that were generated, right? And what are some of our strengths? Share that back collectively. Share back collectively what have been some weaknesses that we've identified and opportunities to address these, right? And what are some of our threats that may impact the livelihood of our organization and the services that we're offering? You also want to turn insights to action. I'm big on implementation. We have to share back what we're gathering, especially if we're gathering data and information from clients. They often generally want to see, like, where did this go? What was this information used for, right? And so you can use this information to clarify roles and responsibilities. Maybe it's clarifying decision-making processes. Maybe it's tweaking client service delivery. Maybe it's improving internal communication. Maybe it's reconnecting and aligning to the vision, the mission statement. Maybe it's that people aspect of it, like nurturing the spiritual side of it, right? So this is going to be like us taking steps forward to take that information and putting it into action. So this is all on the strategy piece. If you want to go like, where might this nest well in some of the bigger activities that we do in organizations? If you've ever done strategic planning or you have one coming up, this fits really well in strategic planning. Because the SWOT interviews really inform this well. So this diagnostic can be a tool within strategic planning. If you do team development work and have team retreats, this can be a really good activity to support what are some areas that we need to give some time and attention and really be thoughtful and strategic in that team development and team building to work towards those objectives, right? And then for us, maybe we're the worker bees in our organization. How do we share this back to my supervisor? How do we share this back to the executive director or the board of commissioners, our board of directors, our leadership folks, right? So you might want to be able to frame this as a tool to really assess the balance within an organization. We're really going to be looking at people. We're going to look at relationships. We're going to look at structures and collectively find a way to build and lean into strengths, do what we've been doing well, but also give us an opportunity to make adjustments, right? It's not a blaming tool. It's not a way to grade the organization, but it's really going to create alignment, build trust and relationship within this organization, right? And here's some easy ways that we can incorporate that using some of these tools, or like, hey, let's think about doing this as part of our strategic planning, right? So you can incorporate some of these things into the daily work as well. So when we look at, we have about 3 minutes left. I want to cover the last 2 slides. So cultural adaptations that deepen learning. So how might we be able to do this on a day-to-day? Talking circles are really good to give everyone a chance to speak and have that voice, right? So we want to give an opportunity to hear from everyone. We give them equal time to speak. It's a structured way of hearing from folks, right? Uninterrupted. There's no hierarchy. There's no rules other than you have 2 minutes to speak, whatever time frame you want to give, uninterrupted. Nobody can chime in, right? And so this is a way to have those shared conversations to feed into the diagnostic. Maybe we do storytelling instead of surveys, right? Tell me about your housing work. Tell me about your experience in community. Tell me when things felt optimal and the organization had a good flow, right? And so this can be a really unassuming way to get people to start sharing what they remember, what they felt. How did things work within the organization at a certain point in time? You can bring in elders or have like a youth advisory input session. That can be through focus groups. This is going into communities. So it's maybe looking outside of the organization to bring out that external voice, right? Something as simple as opening and closing with prayer and reflection really identifies and leans into the cultural and traditional aspect, honoring that spirit, right? And then translating keywords into our traditional language, right? There's always a tie to like ways that we show up in the Western world and navigate in a business setting, there's always a tie to something that we've done culturally. And the one I like when we're talking about organizational diagnostics is really tending the fire. So like in my Diné way, we have like a fire keeper. And for certain ceremonies, we have to have a fire going the entire time of the ceremony. And so you have a person or a set of people that are constantly going to check it, tend to it, move the coals around, bring more wood, just kind of maintaining it, right? So that there's always that fire burning. And that's part of the diagnostic. We're nurturing, we're making sure we're tending to all of these things that are important. If we didn't have that time and attention, we'd have the initial fire blazing and roaring, but if no one's tending to it, it becomes dormant, right? And this is where we can relate some of those things back to, we want to have a good, strong, warm fire that's constantly being tended to, right? And this is what a diagnostic can help us with, right? And so we are at time. I want to just give you this food for thought. So this is going to be your commitment moving forward. Like, how do I keep this moving? How do I implement this? How do I take this information back? So start where you're at, right? Think about those quadrants, think about that information, deepen your practice, expand your circle, identify your circle, and really think about what part of the circle you're going to tend to next, right? Moving forward. And so I just love this quote. I'm not sure where it came from. It was anonymous, but when we work in a good way, our houses remember, right? They hold that. And they kind of give us that security and nurturing. So I want to thank you for your time and attention during this webinar. I hope you have some informative, helpful tools that you can take back, but also know that I'm also available for Q&A. You can reach out to me. My contact information is there. I do a lot of work in Indian country. I have like a lot of customized TA. If you're just curious, like reach out to me. You can even reach out to NLC. They have my contact information as well. So thank you. Thank you for sitting in circle with me today. It was an honor. So I'll turn it back over to NLC.
Thank you so much, Mel. I'm just going to go ahead and move on with the final slides. All right. So thank you much again, Linnell, for taking the time and efforts to give us this wonderful presentation. I know I certainly learned a lot today. As we close out the webinar, please feel free to submit any questions or comments you might have for Linnell in the chat box, and she'll be sure to answer them towards the end. Also, please take a moment to complete our survey about today's webinar that I've just linked for you in the chat. It only takes a minute or so, and your feedback really helps us to do more of what is working well and to improve upon areas that we may need to. We invite you to be as candid as you like. The survey is anonymous. We also hope you can join us for our next webinar on October 21st, Breaking Barriers, Trauma-Informed Coaching for Financial Confidence and Success, again with Linnell. And it will also be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Feel free to access this or any other recorded webinars on our new Gathita Webinars archive, now posted to our YouTube channel. Feel free to view them and share them with your colleagues and friends. And please also check out our upcoming events posted on our various social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We also have an in-house produced podcast titled The Hope of Being a Native American Podcast, where we discuss more topics within Native American housing and self-determination. You can also listen on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, as well as view our video recordings with our guests on YouTube. Once again, I want to thank all our participants for joining today. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we hope to connect real soon. And it looks like we don't have any more questions in the chat. So if you do feel like reaching out, feel free to reach out to us if you do have questions, and leave any feedback you may have in our anonymous feedback survey. So thank you so much, everyone. Bye, Linnell.